Whipping and humiliation seem to have always been an eternal staple of schooling. Evidence survives from ancient Rome, Montaigne's France, Washington's Virginia, or my own high school in western Pennsylvania in the 1950s, where the teacher's personalized paddle hung prominently at the entrance to many a classroom, not for decoration, but for use. The football coach, and if I recall correctly, the algebra teacher, customized their paddles, using a dry cell battery to fashion devices similar to electrified cattle prods. Something in the structure of schooling calls forth violence. While latter-day schools don't allow energetic physical discipline, certainly they are state-of-the-art laboratories in humiliation, as your own experience should remind you. In my first years of teaching, I was told over and over that humiliation was my best friend, more effective than whipping. I witnessed this theory in practice through my time as a teacher. If you were to ask me whether physical or psychological violence does more damage, I would reply that slurs, aspersion, formal ranking, insult, and inference are far and away more deadly. Nor does law protect the tongue-lashed. Early schools in America were quick with cuff or cane, but local standards demanded fairness. Despotic teachers were often quarry themselves, as Washington Irving's Legend of Sleepy Hollow warns us. Listen to the fate of schoolmaster Thomas Beveridge at the hands of the upper-class Latin school in Philadelphia, 11 years before the Revolution. He arrives, enters the school, and is permitted to proceed, until he is supposed to have nearly reached his chair at the upper end of the room, when instantly the door and every window shutter is closed. Now shrouded in utter darkness, the most hideous yells that can be conceived are sent forth from 80 throats. And Ovids and Virgils and Horaces, together with the more heavy metal of dictionaries, are hurled without remorse at the astonished preceptor, who, groping and crawling under cover of the forms, makes the best of his way to the door. When attained, a light is restored, and a death-like silence ensues. Every boy is at his lesson. No one had a hand or voice in the recent atrocity. In the humbler setting of rural Indiana, recreated by Eggleston for Hoosier Schoolmaster, published in 1871, we can easily see that passage of more than a century and the replacement of rich kids by farmers' sons and daughters hasn't altered classroom dynamics. When Ralph looked round the faces of the scholars, the little faces full of mischief and curiosity, the big faces full of an expression which was not further removed than second cousin from contempt, when young Hartsook looked at these faces, his heart palpitated with stage fright. There is no audience so hard to face as one of school children, as many a man has found to his cost. While Ralph was applying to a trustee of the school committee for his job, a large ugly bulldog sniffed at his heels, causing a young girl to nearly giggle her head off at the delightful prospect of seeing a new school teacher eaten up by the ferocious brute. Weary, discouraged, shivering with fear, he is lectured. "You see, we ain't none of your soft sort in these diggins. It takes a man to boss this deestrict. If you get licked, don't come to us. Flat Crick don't pay no insurance, you bet. It takes grit to apply for this school. The last master had a black eye for a month." No limit to pain for those who allow it. One of the most telling accounts of schooling ever penned comes directly from the lips of a legendary power broker, Colonel Edward Mandell House, one of those grand, shadowy figures in American history. House had a great deal to do with America's entry into World War I as a deliberate project to seize German markets in chemicals, armor plate, and shipping, an aspect of our bellicosity rarely mentioned in scholastic histories. When peace came, House's behind-the-scenes maneuvering in the League of Nations contributed to repudiation of the organization. His management of President Wilson led to persistent stories that Wilson was little more than a puppet of the Colonel. In his memoirs, The Intimate Papers of Colonel House, we get a glimpse of elite American schooling in the 1870s. House's early years were school-free. He grew up after the Civil War near Houston, Texas. My brother James, 6 years older than I, was the leader. We all had guns and pistols. There were no childish games, excepting those connected with war. House was 9 at the time. In the evening, around the fireside, there were told tales of daring deeds that we strove to emulate. I cannot remember the time when I began to ride and to shoot. I had many narrow escapes. Twice I came near killing one of my playmates in the reckless use of firearms. They were our toys, and death our playmate. At the age of 14, House was sent to school in Virginia. The cruelty of the other boys made an indelible impression on his character, as you can sift from this account. I made up my mind, at the second attempt to haze me, that I would not permit it. I not only had a pistol, but a large knife, and with these I held the larger, rougher boys at bay. There was no limit to the lengths they would go in hazing those who would allow it. One form I recall was that of going through the pretense of hanging. They would tie a boy's hands behind him and string him up by the neck over a limb until he grew purple in the face. None of it, however, fell to me. What was done to those who permitted it is almost beyond belief. At the Hopkins Grammar School in New Haven at the age of 17, during the Hayes-Tilden campaign of 1876, House began to hang around political offices instead of attending to studies. He came to be recognized and was given small privileges. When the election had to be ultimately settled by an electoral commission, he was allowed to slip in and out of hearings at will. House again. All this was educational in its way, though not the education I was placed in Hopkins Grammar School to get. And it is no wonder that I lagged at the end of my class. I had no interest in desk tasks, but I read much and was learning in a larger and more interesting school. House's story was written over and over in the short, glorious history of American education before schooling took over. Young Americans were allowed close to the mechanism of things. This rough-and-tumble practice kept social class elastic and American achievement in every practical field superb. Now come back to the present while I demonstrate that the identical trust placed in ordinary people 200 years ago still survives where it suits managers of our economy to allow it. Consider the art of driving, which I learned at the age of 11. Without everybody behind the wheel, our sort of economy would be impossible. So everybody is there, IQ notwithstanding. With less than 30 hours of combined training and experience, 100 million people are allowed access to vehicular weapons more lethal than pistols or rifles, turned loose without a teacher, so to speak. Why does our government make such presumptions of competence, placing nearly unqualified trust in drivers, while it maintains such a tight grip on near-monopoly state schooling? An analogy will illustrate just how radical this trust really is. What if I proposed we hand 3 sticks of dynamite and a detonator to anyone who asked for them? All an applicant would need is money to pay for the explosives. You'd have to be an idiot to agree with my plan, at least based on the assumptions you picked up in school about human nature and human competence. And yet gasoline, a spectacularly mischievous explosive, dangerously unstable, and with the intriguing characteristic as an assault weapon that it can flow under locked doors and saturate bulletproof clothing, is available to anyone with a container. 5 gallons of gasoline have the destructive power of a stick of dynamite. The average tank holds 15 gallons, yet no background check is necessary for dispenser or dispensee. As long as gasoline is freely available, gun control is beside the point. Push on. Why do we allow access to a portable substance capable of incinerating houses, torching crowded theaters, or even turning skyscrapers into infernos? We haven't even considered the battering ram aspect of cars. Why are novice operators allowed to command a ton of metal capable of hurtling through school crossings at up to 2 miles a minute? Why do we give the power of life and death this way to everyone? It should strike you at once that our unstated official assumptions about human nature are dead wrong. Nearly all people are competent and responsible. Universal motoring proves that. The efficiency of motor vehicles as terrorist instruments would have written a tragic record long ago if people were inclined to terrorism. But almost all auto mishaps are accidents, while there are seemingly a lot of those